Welcome back, kids. I hope you're ready to hear what happens to Joan and Elizabeth and the other kids at school. I can't wait, can you? Chapter 18, Joan's Wonderful Birthday. Joan, you will soon be 11, Elizabeth said at breakfast the next day as she chopped the top off her boiled egg. Gracious, you are getting old. Joan went red and said nothing. She hated anyone to talk about her birthday because she knew there would be no cards or present or cake for her. She was such a timid little mouse that she had no friends at all except Elizabeth, and Joan was always feeling astonished that the bold Elizabeth should be her friend. I wonder if you'll have a cake, went on Elizabeth, knowing perfectly well that Joan was going to because she herself had ordered it. I wonder what it will be like. Joan scowled at Elizabeth. She really felt angry with her. How silly Elizabeth is, talking about my birthday and if I'm going to have a cake, when she knows quite well that I don't want anything at all said about it, thought Joan. She frowned at Elizabeth and signed her to stop, but Elizabeth happily went on talking. Let me see, it's Friday. That's your birthday, isn't it, Joan? I wonder how many cards you'll have. Joan didn't have a single one last year, and she didn't have a cake either, said Kenneth. I don't believe she's got a father and mother. Well, I have then, said Joan, feeling quite desperate. Funny they never come to see you, not even at half term then, said Hilda, who liked to see Joan getting red. You be quiet, said Elizabeth, suddenly seeing that things were going too far. What I'm surprised at is that your parents bothered to come and see a girl like you, Hilda. If I had a daughter like you, I'd go to the end of the world and stay there. That's enough, Elizabeth, said Nora, who pounced on Elizabeth very often since the little girl refused to tell her secret. Elizabeth said no more. She longed to say quite a lot, but she was learning to control her tongue now. Miss Scott would indeed not have known her. Nothing more was said about Joan's birthday. Just then and after breakfast, as the girls were making their beds, Joan went up to Elizabeth. Please, Elizabeth, she said, for goodness sakes, don't say any more about my birthday. You make things much worse if you do. Think how I shall feel when everyone watches to see what cards and presents come for me by the post, and I haven't any. You are lucky. You have 2 grannies and 2 grandpas and uncles and aunts, but I haven't a single uncle, aunt, or granny, so it's no wonder I don't get many treats. You are unlucky, Joan, said Elizabeth in surprise. Really you are. Well, I won't say any more about your birthday to the others if you don't like it. But she longed to all the same, for she kept hugging her delicious secret. Joan would have a wonderful cake with 11 candles on and cards and presents too. Nora was not kind to Elizabeth that week. She did not say any more to Elizabeth about her secret, but she had quite made up her mind to report her at the next meeting. She thought Elizabeth was very deceitful and mean not to give up her money as everyone else did and not tell her what she had spent it on. After all, we gave her a fine chance to be as decent as possible at the last meeting, said Nora to herself. We really did, and the funny thing is, I felt sure that Elizabeth would be worth that chance and would do her best to keep our rules and help the school as we all try to do. But I was wrong. I don't feel as if I like Elizabeth a bit now. When Thursday came, Elizabeth posted the 3 birthday cards she had bought. She could hardly go to sleep that night for thinking of Joan's pleasure in the morning. It really was lovely to give a surprise to someone. Friday came. Elizabeth leapt out of bed, ran to Joan's bed, hugged her, and cried, Many happy returns of the day, Joan. I hope you'll have a lovely birthday. Here's a little present for you from me. Joan took the parcel and undid it. When she saw the red handbag inside, she was delighted, and she was even more thrilled when she found the comb and the handkerchief and the 50-pence piece. She flung her arms round Elizabeth and squeezed her so hard that Elizabeth almost choked. Oh, thank you, Elizabeth, she cried. It's perfectly lovely. I did so badly want a handbag. I only had that little old purse. Oh, how shall I love using it. It's the nicest present I have ever had. There was another surprise for Joan before she went down to breakfast. Hilda slipped into the bedroom with a lace-edged handkerchief for Joan. She had felt rather ashamed of herself for teasing Joan the day before and had taken one of her best hankies to give her a present. Joan was thrilled. In fact, she was so thrilled that a bright idea came into Elizabeth's head. She flew down to the playroom to see if Harry was there. He wasn't, but she could hear him practicing in the music room. Harry, Harry, cried Elizabeth, rushing up to him and startling him so much that his music fell to the floor. Will you do something for me? Depends what it is, said Harry, picking up his music. Harry, it's Joan Townsend's birthday, said Elizabeth. You know you said you'd give me one of your rabbits, didn't you? Don't you? And I said it wasn't any good because I was going at half term. Well, would you please give it to Joan instead? Because you can't think how pleased she is to have presents. Well, said Harry, not quite sure about it. Go on, Harry, do say yes. Be a sport, begged Elizabeth, her blue eyes shining like stars. It was very difficult to refuse Elizabeth anything when she looked like that. Harry nodded. All right, he said. What shall I do? Bring the baby rabbit into the breakfast time? Oh, said Elizabeth with a squeak of delight. Yes, do. Say, shut your eyes, Joan, and feel what I brought you, and then put it in her arms. What a surprise for her. Well, I'll go and get it right now, said Harry, putting his music away. But she'll have to look after it herself, Elizabeth. It will be her rabbit. I'll look after it for her, said Elizabeth, feeling delighted at the thought of mothering a baby rabbit each day. Hurry, Harry. Elizabeth went back to the bedroom. The breakfast bell rang, and she was tidying her chest of drawers. She slipped her arm through Joan's, and they went downstairs together. They stopped at the letter rack. There was one card for Elizabeth from Mrs. Allen, and in Joan's place were 3 envelopes in which were the cards that Elizabeth had bought. Joan took them down, going red with surprise. She opened them. She took out the first card and read it. With love from Mother. She turned to Elizabeth, her eyes shining. She's remembered my birthday, she said to Elizabeth, and her voice was very happy. She was even more surprised when she found a card marked, With love from Daddy, and she was delighted with Elizabeth's card. Fancy, 3 cards, said Joan, so happy that she didn't notice the writing on the envelopes was the same for all 3. She went into the breakfast quite delighted, and on her chair was the enormous cardboard box from the baker, and a small, neat parcel from the bookshop. Joan gave a cry of astonishment. More presents? Who from, I wonder? She opened the little parcel first, and when she saw the book about birds and read the little card, her eyes filled suddenly with tears. She turned away to hide them. Look, she whispered to Elizabeth, it's from my mother. Isn't it lovely of her to remember my birthday? I didn't think she would. Joan was so happy to have the book, which she thought came from her mother, that she almost forgot to undo the box in which was the enormous birthday cake. Undo this box quickly, begged Elizabeth. Joan cut the string. She took off the lid, and everyone crowded round to see what was inside. When they saw the beautiful cake, they shouted in delight. Joan, what a fine cake! Oh, you are so lucky! Joan was too astonished to say a word. She lifted the cake out of the box on its silver board and stood it on the breakfast table. She stared at it as if it was a dream cake. She couldn't believe it was really true. I say, said Nora, what a cake. Look at the candles and the sugar roses, and look at the message on it. A happy birthday for my darling Joan. Your mother has been jolly generous, Joan. It's the biggest birthday cake I've seen. Joan stared at the message on the cake. She could hardly believe it. She felt so happy that she thought she would really have to burst. It was all so unexpected and so surprising. Elizabeth was even happier. She looked at her friend's delightful face and hugged herself for joy. She was glad she had spent all Uncle Rupert's 10-pound note on Joan. This was better than having a birthday herself. Much, much better. Something that Miss Scott had often said to her flashed into her head. It is more blessed to give than to receive. Miss Scott had said when she had tried to make Elizabeth give some of her toys to the poor children at Christmas time. And Miss Scott was quite right, thought Elizabeth in surprise. I'm getting more fun out of giving these things than if I was receiving them myself. Everybody in the school must share my birthday cake, said Joan in a happy, important voice, and she lifted her head proudly and smiled around. Thanks, Joan. Many happy returns of the day, shouted everybody. And then Harry came in and cried, Joan, shut your eyes and feel what I've got for you. In amazement, Joan shut her eyes, and the next moment the baby rabbit was in her arms. She gave a scream and opened her eyes again. She was so surprised that she didn't hold the rabbit tightly enough, and it leapt from her arms and scampered to the door through which the teachers were just coming to breakfast. The rabbit ran all around them, and the masters and mistresses stopped in astonishment. Is this a rabbit I see? Cried Mademoiselle, who was afraid of all small animals. Oh, these children, what will they bring to breakfast next? I'm so sorry, said Harry, catching the rabbit. You see, it's Joan's birthday, and I was giving her one of my rabbits. I see, said Miss Best. Well, take it out to the hutches now, Harry, and Joan can have it again after breakfast. Oh, Elizabeth, I'm so happy, whispered Joan as they sat down to their eggs and bacon. I can't tell you how happy I am. You needn't tell me, said Elizabeth, laughing. I can see how happy you are, and I'm glad. And you'll have to come back tomorrow for chapter 19.